The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
So let's see. In 24 years, Dan Snyder ran one of the jewel franchises of the NFL into the ground, watched a stadium decay to the point where sewage was leaking on the fans and railings were collapsing. And in 24 months, Josh Harris has hired a general manager, a head coach, drafted the franchise quarterback, won more than 11 games for the first time in 33 years, won their first playoff game since 2006, went to the NFC Championship game for the first time in 33 years, and the cherry on top has made a deal with the District of Columbia to put a stadium back on the RFK site. As Nick Bakay used to say in Tale of the Tape, push Josh Harris. Josh Harris gets the edge there. Wow, what a run this has been, and this is going to be so exciting today. At 11 o'clock, there will be a news conference in D.C. I'm not sure exactly where it's – National Press Club is where it's going to be held. And Mayor Muriel Bowser of the District of Columbia will be there. Josh Harris, the principal owner of the Commanders, will be there. I would imagine Mitch Rales will be there as well. Mark Ein, who put the two of them together, three Washingtonians, as I like to call them, who are bringing the team back to the District of Columbia. And it's now been reported that Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, will be there. Now, this still is subject to approval by the city council, and Phil Mendelson has indicated that there's going to be pushback and all that stuff that goes along with this kind of dance that we have when we build stadiums. But it's going to get done, and I don't think Roger Goodell would be showing up unless they were 99.9% sure that this is going to go through. The target date would be 2030. That may or may not be realistic. I know that's a long way off, but it's going to take something like 18 months just to take down RFK Stadium. It's not going to be blown up. They have to take it down piece by piece. So that's going to take time. And then once you put a shovel in the ground, you're talking about 3 years. That wasn't the case with now Northwest Stadium, as they threw that up in 18 months because Jack Kent Cooke wanted it to happen. But hopefully, in my lifetime, I will hear something like these sweet sounds again.
We're at RFK Stadium, which is sold out for the 130th consecutive time. The Eastern Division of the NFC, Washington with the best record in pro football, 13-2. The Giants, their opponents, 3-11-1, a most disappointing year. Ideal weather conditions, however, temperature 43 degrees, northwest wind 9 miles an hour. Forecast is sunny and cool. It couldn't be better. What a majestic, beautiful sight. Our nation's capital with the Washington Monument in the background. And this great city has been worked to a football fever and frenzy by this Redskin team. They do love them here.
They love the Commanders. They love the Commanders now. That's 2 names later. It's almost 3 decades later. It's one bad stadium later. But they are coming back now. They're coming back probably into a dome. The economics would dictate that you can't just use a stadium for 10 football games a year. They have to use it for other purposes, concerts and other events. But, that's part of the cost of doing business. It didn't used to cost $3 billion to build a stadium, but it now does. And, if you're wondering, could this have happened under Dan Snyder if they were willing to put aside what a jerk he is and work with him? Probably not. I don't think Snyder would have been able to come up with $2.5 billion to build a stadium. He was heavily leveraged. And one of the reasons that he had to sell the team was that he was staring down a debt of $450 million, which he had to pay off within 5 years. And he wasn't going to be able to get a silent partner to come on board with him to pay that off. So economics helped to dictate that Snyder was out. Of course, the toxic atmosphere that he ran and all the other mishigas that went along with his ownership. But you now have really good businessmen running the football team, and they have proven over the last 24 months they know what the hell they're doing. Will they make mistakes along the way? Of course they will. Will we have seasons like we just had on a regular basis? No. I mean, that doesn't work that way in the NFL unless you get everything right, like the Kansas City Chiefs for a run. But it does look like they have the makings of a team that can make a run, and we'll get into some of the things that they did in the draft. Most of the analysis that I've seen says, yeah, they did a really good job. Kind of boring, no sexy names, no Jaden Daniels at the top of the board, but that's what you want. If you have a good year, you're drafting at the bottom of the first round, which is what they did. They did not make any trades, which kind of surprised me. I thought they would want to have more picks, but Adam Peters, staying true to his board, looked at it and said, no, there's not anything worth trading down for. We're going to stay where we are. And, you hear this every year. They take a player and they say, this looks like a guy who probably should have been in the first round. We had a first-round grade on him. We took him in the second round, even the third round. But, we'll see as it all plays out. And then we'll get to the whole Michigas with Shedeur Sanders and all the issues that went along this weekend. Mel Kiper was kind of in the eye of the storm of that. We'll get to that in about 15 or 20 minutes. But, man, just to think that 2 years ago, and it was just about exactly 2 years ago when it was announced that Josh Harris had reached a deal to buy the team for $6.1 billion, and to have gotten to where we are right now in such a short period of time. I mean, I'm at the age now where 2 years is a blink, but, you think about all the years of the hopelessness of Snyder, and we looked at his age, man in his 50s, he wasn't going anywhere, and then one thing led to another. The dominoes started to fall, and now we have a circumstance where it's what everybody has wanted forever and ever. Is it going to be exactly the same atmosphere at RFK? No, it's not, and it can't. It can't be. It's a dome stadium, and dome stadiums can get very loud. I go back to the Love You Blue Oilers back in 1978 when Earl Campbell put on one of the greatest performances on Monday Night Football ever. And the blue and white pom-poms that were waving that night. That can be a great dome atmosphere. And, you see it in places like in New Orleans, when Dallas has a good team, that's the roof does open. I don't think this is going to be a retractable roof from what I've heard. That would cost even more than $3 billion. But it'll be an atmosphere that'll be great, and it'll be really great if they win. And it looks like the organization is back on track after wandering in the Dan Snyder desert for 24 years. All right, we will get to more on that, more on the stadium. I'm checking Twitter to see if there's more notes coming through. What the latest is that Roger Goodell will be there, Josh Harris will be there, the mayor will be there, and this will be announced at an 11 o'clock news conference at the National Press Club that the stadium will be built, and I'm sure the details will be filled in as I would think. I'm not sure about this, but I would think that they would have a drawing of what this is going to look like. I know that they've been talking to various firms about stadium design and so forth. That thing that you saw some years ago on 60 Minutes about an open stadium with a moat, no, that's not happening. And there really isn't even the room to build the moat around the RFK site. And look, the tailgating that people fondly remember, there'll be some of that, not as much. Most of the parking is going to be underground. But compared to where they've been, and, this stadium, although it's now old, it's almost 30 years old, it was never great from the beginning. And as Dan Snyder let it rot, it just got worse and worse and worse. And, just to keep it up and presentable for the next 5 years, and it could be 5 more seasons there, that Josh Harris has had to dump $750 million or $75 million. I guess $75 million to keep it just presentable. All right, to the Capitals. And, talk about the annual column that Tony used to write, Choking Dogs. And I hate to bring this up, but the Capitals are among the teams that have had more than their share of blown 3-1 leads. You can go back to 1987 when you had that classic 4 overtime game against the Islanders on Easter Sunday when they finally lost the series, and they had a 3-1 lead. In that was the Patrick Division semifinals. Then 92 against the Pittsburgh Penguins, up 3-1 in the divisional series. They lose that as well. And 10 years ago in the Eastern Conference second round against the Rangers, they were also up 3-1, and they lost. And this had fear of that for a variety of reasons from Friday night, not just that they lost the game, but Logan Thomas got knocked out with what looked like an injury that, could have knocked him out for the series. Turned out he took a hit to the head, but did pass concussion protocol. And they lost soundly in that game. Montreal dominated the game, and that's, a series can shift. Capitals had all the momentum going into it with 2 games that Carberry said they easily could have lost, but they got that game 3 under their belt, and last night as they fell behind, they were prepared for the situation where they were able to handle the onslaught and were able to make the comeback and win the game.
But I can tell you from talking to our guys over the last 48 hours, anytime you experience something, and even though some guys have played in Stanley Cup finals, some guys have played in playoff rounds, whether it was with us last year or in different organizations, still going through that last game is an experience to get used to and comfortable with. And whoa, this is next level. Crowd noise, energy in the building. So, like I said yesterday, getting comfortable and experiencing that and then knowing what to expect, absolutely, I think it plays a role for our guys. And I felt like tonight we were much more comfortable in the environment, knowing what to expect in Game 4 and knowing what the crowd noise was going to feel like, what the anthems were going to feel like. And I felt like our start was dialed. Like that, everything that comes with this building and the difficulties of it, I felt like we managed it so much better tonight than we did in Game 3.
Now, sometimes a series, often a game, will turn on one play. And from the accounts that I'm reading, this from Bailey Johnson in the Washington Post, with just over 13 minutes to play in the third period, and with the Capitals trailing by a goal, Tom Wilson lined up Montreal Canadiens defenseman Andre Carrier for a bone-crushing hit. It was big and violent, and most importantly for Wilson, given his reputation as a player who can cross the line, it was clean. And that led to a goal as the puck came loose from Carrier, and the Capitals were able to tie the game, which Carberry says really was the turning point.
Completely changed the momentum in the game, and that's a prime example of one of the elements that he brings to the game, and he does so many different things, and everybody in here knows how impactful he is, how unique he is, and you saw firsthand how significant he can play a role in a team coming back and winning a hockey game the most important time of the year.
Wilson in the Stanley Cup Finals, it's been 7 years. Talking about time flying. 7 years since they won the Cup against Vegas. And although Alex Ovechkin was the MVP of the series, most of the people I listen to who know their hockey were saying, oh, yeah, Tom Wilson, he's the key. He's the key to everything they do. Here's Wilson on the hit to turn the game.
It's been a physical series both ways. Getting hit, giving hits, they've been really physical. So it's a long series, and you just try and kind of invest and continue to play hard every shift you're out there. And, it was a big hit, and the boys were able to score right after. So that's kind of the way that hockey goes. Okay,
so the game winner comes from Andrew Mangiapane at 3:37 to play. Now, they're up at that point by a score of 3-2, and I don't watch a ton of hockey, but I can tell you, 3.5 minutes to go with a 1-goal lead doesn't mean bupkis, because they're gonna yank the goalie, and things can really ramp up. And if Montreal ties the game at that point, the place goes crazy, and they're playing in the last couple of minutes with explosive noise. But they get an empty netter off of that. They get another one, and the game is over, and they win 5-2. The other big thing about this, and we didn't know until game time whether this was going to happen, but on Friday night, Logan Thompson gets knocked out with friendly fire. He has a collision in the goal, and there's a question as to whether he's going to come back. Dylan Strome didn't mean to hit him, but he hits him, and that could be, what a lot of people have looked at over the years with the Capitals 10 times blowing 2-1 leads, and now 3 times, most recently 10 years ago, blowing 3-1 series lead. oh, my God, here we go again. They won the first 2 games in Washington with Logan Thompson standing on his head in his own building, as they like to say in hockey terms, and now they may have to go the rest of the way without him. But game starts, number 48 skates out to goal. He's back, and as they do in hockey, they always downplay the injuries.
I kind of got my bell rung a bit there. Scary. I think it definitely could have been a lot worse, but, coming back from an injury, I had to do some protocol. I kind of lost my balance getting up, but luckily, things were okay and I'm able to play. But, thankful that it wasn't worse because, it definitely, I think, looked a lot worse than it was.
So Thompson back in the net, Capitals back home on Wednesday night. If they lose that game, then they would go to Montreal on Friday. And then should they lose that one as well, and then it really gets nervous, May 4th they'd be back here. But it is a 7 o'clock faceoff on Wednesday night, and unlike the first 4 where they've been playing every other day, they're now going to have 2 days off. They're off today, off tomorrow, and don't play till Wednesday. Again, it's hockey. Anything can happen. And a 3-1 lead is nice, but you just never know. You just never know what can happen. And I think a big key is that Thompson is healthy enough to play and played another good game in goal last night. Coming up, Mel Kiper and what happened this weekend as Shedeur Sanders fell down the draft board. We'll get to that and more on the Shedeur situation as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Oh, false start out of the gate. Just in case you have any doubts about this 11 o'clock news conference at the National Press Club, Mayor Muriel Bowser tweeted this out about an hour ago. The time is now. Let's bring the Commanders home. And she's got a video of the glory days of RFK with the stand shaking and Theismann leading him out of the huddle with Riggins behind him and the Hogs in front of him. And, all those feelings of the good old glory days coming back. And at least on the field this past year, those days were back at a decrepit stadium. Once they get to the site, which is, where they had the glory days back at RFK, once that's built, it won't exactly have the same feel. It'll be different because it's more than likely going to be a dome stadium. And this will be interesting, too. I wonder if this will be a question at the news conference today. Will you have a section where the stands shake? Because that is, I guess, the most iconic image of that period of time when you hear Frank Herzog say, and now the stands shake, we want Dallas, and the stands were bouncing up and down. The reason that those stands bounced, it's not like they designed it that way. RFK Stadium opened as DC Stadium in 1961. This was a period of time where they were building multi-purpose stadiums like Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh, Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati, the Vet in Philadelphia. They all look the same. These round, big concrete masses where you could play baseball games and you could play football games. The Vet, they had an artificial turf field. I believe they had that in Cincinnati, too. And the temporary stands were put in after the baseball season ended. See, that was outfield space. And you don't need that kind of space for football, so that's how they put more stands. As a matter of fact, when they first started playing football games at D.C. Stadium, it held 50,000. The 5,000 were temporary seats, which they would roll out once baseball season started. Well, in 1971, the Senators left town. We didn't get a baseball team back until the Nationals appeared in 2005, so the temporary seats stayed. They never took them out. And those were the ones that would shake because, well, they weren't riveted in concrete like the rest of them. So that was sort of circumstance more than anything else. But when Dan Snyder was talking about building a stadium, and maybe 10 years now, excuse me, he was talking about the stands shaking. Will they have some area like that just for nostalgia purposes? Now, as we get further and further away, it's now almost been 30 years since they left. The number of people that have those fond memories of the stand shaking, other than what they see on NFL films and other historical, remembrances of those days, that lessens, and they're going to have a younger crowd now, and everything moves on. But it's just such a good feel in town today. I know we had a report a couple of weeks ago that this was going to happen, but things can get derailed. And it's not 100%. The city council still has to approve this. But unlike where Ted Leonsis made a fool of himself a year and a half ago, showing up at Potomac Yards and saying he had a deal to put his teams in Virginia, and that quickly fell through, and now he's back in the District of Columbia. This time, they know they've got the votes. They know that Phil Mendelssohn is going to flip on this, and he will approve this, and this will get done. And this will be the legacy, a big part of the legacy of Muriel Bowser, that she kept the Caps and the Wizards in D.C., and she made a deal to bring the Commanders back home. And, many other things will have happened in her administrations, but the lasting legacy when we look back is, oh, yeah, she made it happen. And if you think about how FedEx Field came to be, or when it opened into what he called Raljon, Jack Kent Cooke went to try and make a deal with Sharon Brett Kelly, who is the mayor of D.C., because Marion Barry was in jail for trying to buy crack cocaine. Famously, the video of the bee set him up. And so she was the mayor at the time. And from what I'm told, Cook, an aging Jack Kent Cooke, went in to talk to her, and he liked to do this to women. He gave her a little pinch on the butt, and things kind of went downhill from there. She called him a billionaire bully. He went out and bought some land near Capitol Center in Landover and threw up a stadium that was never good from the beginning and just got worse over the years. This is going to be done much better way. They're not going to throw it up quickly. It's going to take almost a year and a half to take down RFK, and then once they start construction on the new stadium, you're talking about 3 years. 3 years from shovel in the ground until the place opens, and hopefully in time for the 2030 season. All right, the draft. And other than, the Shedeur slide, kind of a dull draft, right? I mean, this didn't have the sex appeal of last year because the quarterback draft wasn't as good. There weren't really monster trades. There were some trades along the way. And a very intriguing trade at number 2 when Cleveland traded down, and it was assumed that Cleveland at 5 now was going to take Shedeur Sanders. And he kept sliding and sliding and sliding, slid all the way out of the first round, slid all the way out of the second round, all the way out of the third round and the fourth round. And then finally, in the 5th round, who does he go to? The Cleveland Browns. And if you look at the way this all unfolded with what Deion Sanders was saying about his son, indications to me were that he didn't want to go to the Cleveland Browns. It was pretty much known it was known for 2 weeks, but maybe even before that Tennessee was going to take Cam Ward number 1. That made the number 2 pick with Cleveland needing a quarterback. They've got an aging Joe Flacco there and a couple of other spare parts. Kenny Pickett has gone there. That would make sense that they would draft Shedeur Sanders at number 2. And so when that didn't happen and he slid all the way down, well, everything that they did indicated that they were trying to avoid Cleveland. They were trying to pull what they call an Eli. As Eli Manning made it known he didn't want to go to the Chargers, and basically with the help of his father engineered a trade to the New York Giants where he won 2 Super Bowls. And this seemed to be their strategy. So somewhat ironic that he winds up in Cleveland, the place where it appeared he didn't want to go, by acting, as reports said, like a jerk in these interviews and coming unprepared. And, the story that was reported by Todd McShay over the weekend is when he showed up for his last-minute interview for the Giants. Remember, they wanted to take another look at him a couple of days before the draft. He showed up unprepared and didn't take kindly to Brian Daboll saying, hey, what's the deal? You weren't ready for this interview. So they distanced themselves from him. And I guess, word gets out around the league. People know people. And it became known throughout the league, this guy is going to be trouble here. And he finally winds up with Cleveland. Now, the one who took a lot of heat for this was Mel. I love Mel Kiper, work with him, consider him a great friend. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't know if this draft was his finest moment, because the more Shedeur slid, the angrier he got. And finally, he winds up in Cleveland, and he's on the set. This is Saturday, and he's with Louis Riddick, part of ESPN's draft coverage, and Reese Davis, who at this point is anchoring the coverage with Mike Greenberg out. I guess Greenberg doesn't do the last day. And so this is where it went after finally, Deion winds up in Cleveland. And this is what Louis Riddick said to ignite what has now gone viral with this from Mel Kiper.
This is personal.
Has he had an off the field issue? No, he has not.
Mel, you don't have to sell it to me.
No, I don't know what we're talking about here.
You're right. You're right. Yes, you're right. But you know what? But Mel, the draft has spoken.
That's right. That's the key, Mel. It's not putting a value judgment on whether those who passed were right or wrong. They did.
Yep.
So now, whenever you're in circumstances in life, whether you like them, whether you don't like them, whether they're fair or whether they're unfair, you might have to deal with them.
That's right.
And now Shadur Sanders has to deal with
everything.
And for whatever reason, whether he played a minute, microscopic percentage, 0%, or it's a legitimate criticism of the way he conducted himself, this was the result.
Yeah.
Now he has an opportunity to answer it. I think yelling at the NFL about it is not.
There's not a quarterback. Boomer Esiason was not happy when he was a second-round pick. Tom Brady was not happy. They dropped. How'd they turn out?
And you know what?
Nobody's arguing that can happen.
Race, the NFL has been clueless for 50 years when it comes to evaluating quarterback. Clueless. No idea what they're doing in terms of evaluating quarterback. That's proof. There's proof of that.
How many
times? They say we know exactly what we're talking about with quarterback. They don't.
Nobody's batted 1,000 there, though.
That's correct.
Right? I mean, I think that's
all that matters now is what happens going forward. We talk about it all the time. There is the evaluation phase, there's the evaluation and selection phase, which we're in right now, and then there's the development and implementation phase. That's where we're heading to right now. That's all that matters for him. Kevin Stefanski, Andrew Berry,
and Lou.
Have at it.
Quarterbacks now, and Reese, you know it well as anybody, college kids now get paid. They're professional. They're getting paid. They're commercials. They're out there. You got to deal with that. If you're in the NFL, you got to deal with that. Okay? He's saying whatever he's saying behind closed doors. What's he saying? I want to be the guy. I should be this. I should be that. Deion's saying he's the best player in the draft. He's the best quarterback. Second best to Travis Hunter. Best quarterback. Who is it? What quarterback out there didn't think they should have been a high first-round pick?
Again, nobody's criticizing what happened. We're saying he has to deal with the reality of the result from it.
All right.
That's all.
Wow. So, yeah, Mel got pretty heated about that. And, look, he's been wrong on these before. The Jimmy Clausen one, very famous. That would have been 2010, I believe. Yeah, 2010, where Carolina took him in the second round. And Mel had him as the first quarterback off the board, maybe among the first few picks. And he said, Mel will put himself out there. I think this is a sign of strength. A lot of people moonwalk away from their mistakes. But he put himself out there and he said, if Jimmy Clausen doesn't become a star in this league, I'll retire. Well, that's been 15 years. Jimmy Clausen didn't become a star. Mel is still working. And I've asked him about it. He said he did offer to retire, but ESPN said no, and he's got a new contract. He got one a few months ago, so he's not going anywhere and shouldn't go anywhere. But he got angry about this. He took it personally, I guess is the way to put it. And look, Mel, when he projects where a player is going to go, this is from months and months and months and years, really, of research, talking to people. He's telling you where he believes this player is viewed as a draft pick, whether he's a high first round, second round, maybe at the end of the draft 7. He's going on what he's hearing from scouts and coaches and players and all the people he talks to. So I guess he felt like he was misled by this. And look, what's behind this? I don't know. I don't believe these people who say, oh, yeah, this is the NFL sticking it to him. You're telling me that 32 owners got together and decided, like on a Zoom call, oh, we're really going to show this kid? And because if any of the owners thought that this kid can be good, and maybe he will be, but, he's not big. He's not fast. I mean, that's, you talk about genetics. He's nothing like Deion in the 40. And he's accurate, but he doesn't have a rocket arm. He may turn out to be great. They underestimated Tom Brady 25 years ago. Understood. But they're going on all the scouting that they do. And look, Adam Peters is a great general manager. If Adam Peters thought that Shadur Sanders could be a star, he'd have taken him in the 5th round or the 4th round and developed him. This is what they used to do with the Packers when Brett Favre was there. They used to draft quarterbacks all the time. And They even had Kurt Warner in as an undrafted free agent. They'd bring him in. Sometimes they'd develop him like Mark Brunell and then trade him for value. As Brunell went to Jacksonville, there have been others that they had over the years, and they knew that Favre was going to be their quarterback. So they would take him. He, according to all the evaluations, he wasn't good enough to be drafted in the first 4 rounds. And then he was taken in the 5th by an owner who maybe is as close to Dan Snyder as you can get, Jimmy Haslam. Remember, he's the one that took Johnny Manziel when people said, ooh. A lot of warning signs there. Off the field more so. No off the field issues with Shedeur. But yeah, it's an inexact science. They miss sometimes, but a lot of times you'll see a player taken late and he doesn't live up to what they thought. And with all the ancillary stuff that goes along with him, with Dion now saying that he wants to be involved in Shedeur's first meetings with the Browns because he knows something's going on here. Well, that's the kind of stuff that teams didn't want to deal with. If they thought he could be great, they would discard all that. But if the high water mark is Andy Dalton, which some have said maybe Teddy Bridgewater, who might have been a really good quarterback but had a serious knee injury, then the juice ain't worth the squeezing. It's just not worth it for you. Now, I had some really awful stuff in this. Be interesting to see how the NFL handles this. The defensive coordinator for the Falcons, his name is Jeff Ulbrich. And what they do before the draft is they give teams the cell phone numbers of like the top 300 prospects, just, so they'll have it available if they draft them and need to call them. So Jeff Ulbrich's 21-year-old son somehow got a hold of the list of the prospects, and he had the cell phone number for Shedeur Sanders. His name is Jax Ulbrich, Jax, 21 years old. He saw the number, and he thought it'd be fun to do a little prank call to Shedeur, and he said, we're going to take you with the next pick, man, but you're going to have to wait a little longer. Sorry about that. He said he was from the Saints. He said he was Mickey Loomis, the Saints general manager. Shedeur was kind of confused by it, didn't know what it meant. The kid hung up, and so it came to the surface that, in fact, Jax Ulbrich had done this prank call. The Falcons have said they're not going to discipline him. Ulbrich put out a post saying it was completely inexcusable. It was embarrassing. I made a mistake. Thank you for accepting my call earlier today. I hope you find it in your heart to forgive me. Again, the Falcons are not going to do anything, but the league is going to look into this. And you can't punish the son because he doesn't work for the Falcons, but the dad, there might be some kind of sanction against him because he was careless. This should not have wound up in the hands of his son. So we'll see where that goes, but that was sort of a terrible thing. Tyler Warren, that's the guy who at Penn State wore 44 because his dad was a John Riggins fan. He's a really good player. He wound up with the Indianapolis Colts, but he got a prank call before he was selected in the first round. And he said that somebody had pranked him too. But the Shedeur thing really got to an ugly level. And Mike Freeman of the USA Today has a column about this. And I don't agree with what he's saying here, but this is a feeling that is going around a lot of people who follow the league. He said that, it was known that Shedeur didn't interview well. He was arrogant in the meetings, that he, quote unquote, disrespected the draft process. Well, he says, let's look at the draft process. The Ravens selected Marshall pass rusher Mike Green, who has been accused of sexual assault. He's denied that, says it wasn't true, but the accusations are out there. And what Mike Freeman says is the aspect of the vaunted draft process shines a light on the NFL's hypocrisy. Punish a player for not saying the right things in a pre-draft meeting with coaches and team executives. Reward a player for being accused of terrible acts. Could Sanders have handled things better? Sure. He's basically admitted as such. But when you look at like the Ravens situation where there's all these allegations about Justin Tucker and similar to what Deshaun Watson was accused of in his days in Houston. They did draft a kicker, by the way, which was interesting in Baltimore. Now, Tucker had a bad year, but if more allegations come out, if there's more evidence that there were, in fact, these sexual harassment things that happened at the massage parlors. Well, they got a backup there. Green has faced 2 separate allegations of sexual assault between high school and college. That happened in Virginia. Then he transferred to Marshall, where he wound up. Freeman writes, it should be noted when the Browns were dealing with the numerous and ugly accusations against quarterback Deshaun Watson, John Harbaugh said the Ravens have a zero-tolerance policy. He didn't say what zero tolerance was for, but use your imagination. There are parts of the league that the NFL wants players and fans to revere, but what the league forgets is we see the ugly corners of the sport too. We don't ignore those. We just as are aware of them as the manicured images the league wants us to solely consume. The draft is over. The process continues. The extremely flawed process. Well, the whole deal with any sport is if you can play, you can play. And they will overlook almost anything that doesn't put a player in jail, including the famous Steve Spurrier quote, he's not in jail, is he? Then they will do that. But Shedeur, they felt the talent wasn't worth it. Will they be proven wrong? Yeah, quite possible. We don't know. But right now, the gamble on the part of the teams was we're passing on what could be a franchise quarterback because we think not that he's a bad guy off the field or on the field, but what we saw in the pre-draft process with the father that comes along, the very high-profile father who has a great forum to complain if things aren't going the way he wants them to go for his son, that they just said, we don't want to get in that business. We're not willing to roll the dice that won't be a problem for a player that we don't believe can be any higher than Teddy Bridgewater or Andy Dalton. That's what it came down to. And talent trumps everything else. And he may have great talent and may turn out to be a great player. But the evaluation process says, ain't that great. Just ain't that great. And so all the other things that come along make us think, we're not going to take a gamble on that. I think if the Browns didn't take him, he might have slid even to the 7th round. I think that might have been entirely possible because they're really, really the reaction that you're getting, especially today, like, well, that's the way it goes. All right, coming up, much more on the draft. We'll have some more follow-up on what the Commanders did over the weekend. And also, this is the 18th anniversary of the drafting of perhaps the biggest bust in NFL history. That and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. I think giving grades from a draft, kind of a silly exercise, because we don't know how these guys are going to turn out. And if you find somebody in the 5th round who becomes an all-pro or a Hall of Famer in retrospect, it's a great draft. And, just depends on how it all pans out. But that's part of the exercise that goes along with the draft. And for what it's worth, Mark Maskey gives the Commanders draft a B+. And the main reason for it, he says, is the Commanders have spent the offseason they haven't spent the offseason acting like they are Super Bowl contenders. Well, you can argue that. I don't know. They have a quarterback who can, make them Super Bowl contenders. And if he takes another step up from a tremendous rookie year, who knows? The sky's the limit, it seems like, with Jaden Daniels. But you also have the possibility of a sophomore slump and things that go along with it. But they used only 5 draft picks. They had only 5 because of the deals that they made, like for Marshawn Lattimore and Laramie Tunsil. They had to give up draft capital to do that. And they went into this draft, the feeling was, you got to get yourself an edge rusher. Whatever you do, edge rusher. And it was expected in the first round, although they were picking at the end of the first round, that there would be edge rushers available. Kind of a surprise, although, and, they sell this stuff, so you got to take this stuff with a grain of salt. But they took an offensive lineman, and he may turn out to be great. I mean, he may have, potential to be an all-pro, and they say he's a great athlete. He was 6'5", 311 pounds, Josh Connerly. Very impressive in his interviews that he did with the media, and said, I think the key thing when they talked to him on Saturday.
And that's the goal. That's the next step. And I'm glad that I'm here and able to propel us to that, And I come from winning. Only lost 6 games at Oregon in 3 years, but, losing's foreign. So all I came here to do is win.
Yeah, the question was about the team coming within a game of the Super Bowl, and he says that's the goal. That's the goal to get there. He comes from a winning program. That's definitely what you want to hear. He doesn't turn 22 until November. He had, excellent times and vertical jump and all that stuff at the combine. He actually was a running back in high school. That tells you what kind of an athlete he is. 5-star recruit, committed to Oregon, third-team All-American. I mean, everything you heard and saw from the tape and so forth indicates that this guy could be great, and he moves into right tackle or will compete for right tackle. If he wins that job, maybe he's there for 10 years, and he's part of the protection for the franchise, for Jaden Daniels. That's all part of it. And then in the second round, and this was really cool. I really enjoyed this. I got to know Gary Clark, doing some television with him many, many years ago, 25 years ago, I think. Gary Clark was the former player, and they do this in the second round. He was the one who got to announce the pick.
What's up, Commanders fans? Commanders, where are you? Check this out. With the 61st pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the 3-time Super Bowl champions, 5 times world champions, Washington Commanders selects Trey Amos, defensive back, Mississippi.
Yeah, so they went D back, and that's a need too. The thing I like about him, who knows if he can play, but the thing I like about him is he's big. He's 6'1", 195. Mikey Sanderson was great this past year, a great pickup. Maybe one of the reasons he lasted until the second round is he was small, but I think you want to have some size back there. And Amos comes from kind of a similar background of a lot of picks these days. They don't come from just one school. In his case, he comes from 3 different schools, and this was the rundown from Adam Peters after selecting him in the second round.
We would have taken him with our first-round pick. He was in the mix for our first-round pick, so that's what we thought of him, just on a high level. Really, really impressed with the type of young man and player he is. And so it was another one of those where the whole building was really pumped, and I don't know if you guys could hear it. It was probably our R&D department was the loudest. He was the top guy on their board coming into today, and really by far the top guy on our board not by far, but he was clearly the top guy on our board when we picked. And so we were really excited that he was there. And the way he plays, love the way he plays at the line of scrimmage. He's a press corner who can be really physical at the line of scrimmage, but he's also a guy who can really play in any scheme you want. And I think that's what separates him from a lot of different guys. And you talk about his ball skills. He's got excellent ball skills. He took the ball away. This year he had 3 interceptions. I think he's got 30-plus PBUs over his career. So really a guy who we covet in terms of taking the ball away, and those are the things that we really look for. He can run. He's physical. He's big. He's kind of got everything you want as a corner. And just some of the things like we talked about with Josh yesterday, he was really, really good in our metrics against really good players. So the guys we had graded really high, he was really a 96th percentile against the really good players. So in terms of all that, all those things lined up, you got to think Jeff Beathard was a big proponent of his going down there, and then he also cross-checks our corners and says he really, really loved them. And then Jason Simmons went down for his pro day and really got a chance to see him in his element, which he was really impressed with in terms of the way he supported his teammates, the way he competed there, and just came away really impressed, kind of standing back and observing everything. So Trey is a guy who did it the hard way. He went. He's from the Lafayette, Louisiana area. He went to Lafayette College right out of high school, and he was there for 3 years. And then he was good enough to go to Alabama the year after that, and then from Alabama, which he played really well. If you guys watch the SEC title game last year, I think it was against when he was with Alabama against Georgia, had a really good performance there where we first really noticed him, and then went to Ole Miss and with some coaches that he knew there playing the same scheme because Alabama changed coaches. So He's earned everything he's got, and he's a guy who his play style is really, really what we want in a corner.
So it's Trey Amos, second round, and he has a possibility. These guys come out older now, most cases. He's 23 years old, having been to 3 different schools, plays 5 years of college football, and could start opposite Lattimore. So that gives them certainly depth in the secondary with him. And they say that, we had a first-round grade on him. I'm sure they did. But, you got to sell the pick a little bit. Now, here's the interesting one to me, the most interesting one of the first round, because of what could possibly happen in the domino effect that they could finally have that kick returner that they're looking for. Did not have a third-round pick. So they picked first round, they picked in the second round, and then had to wait until the fourth round on Saturday to get to this. And they took Jalen Lane, who's a wide receiver from Virginia Tech, averaged 21.8 yards on kick returns, 10.9 yards on punt returns in 2 seasons, 5 college seasons coming out of Virginia Tech. It's another guy who made the rounds a little bit in college football. But for whatever this is worth, Chris Trapasso, who's one of the draft analysts, there's a million of them now. Trapasso is a guy who analyzes college players and says he was projected in rounds 2 to 3 of the draft on his boards. And he says, quote, he feels like that day 2 receiver who in a few years will realize should be locked into round 1 in a weaker draft class. Think George Pickens, Rashee Rice, Jaden Reed, Nico Collins, or any of those who were picked in the second round, Deebo Samuel, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf. He's lightning in a bottle out of the slot, and he looks like he has that speed that you want to have. He didn't run a variety of routes, but when you need him to do it, he can do it. That's a very intriguing pick for them. I think that again, you're always looking for a guy who can be a big-time wide receiver. He's got history with Deebo Samuel. His father was a coach in high school, and he was a ball boy for that team from South Carolina, and that's where Deebo's from, and Bobby Ingram, who is the Commanders wide receivers coach. So that could be one to watch. And then, when you get in these later rounds, last couple of rounds where they again, not a fifth-round pick. So the last 2 picks that they made, it's like buying a car, a used car. It's fine. Maybe it's been in an accident along the way. You got to check the Carfax. Maybe it's got a few dings on it, whatever it is. But, it could be serviceable. And in the 6th round, they took a linebacker named Kane Madrano, 6'3", 222 pounds. He was fast. I think speed is very important. Jimmy Johnson said that was the most important thing to him, coaching speed. And he actually has some history here in that he had worked with Ken Norton Jr., who was the linebackers coach at UCLA before coming to Washington last year. And this is a guy who started out as a wide receiver, so he's got speed. And they switched him to linebacker, which he had never played before. In his last 2 seasons, he was a starter. Why do you think he slipped to the 6th round? Well, he missed a bunch of tackles. That's what they're worried about. But if they can get that fixed, he created turnovers, 3 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions. It's a guy, who might be a big special teams contributor and down the line could get a start. I don't think that speed is anything that can be overlooked. That's a very important aspect of it. And then they took a running back in the 7th round, Ja'Cory Croxy Merritt from Arizona. A very interesting story here. Is 24 years old, so that's kind of old to be coming in as a running back in the league, but that's kind of the way things work now. But in 2019, he played 8 games at Alabama State, according to ESPN stats, which would have made him ineligible to redshirt. But Alabama State claimed that Croxy Merritt actually played in just 4 games and switched numbers with another running back, and that ESPN accidentally conflated the two. That sounds like something out of high school. I find that to be dubious, but maybe it happened. Anyway, he winds up at Arizona last year, and he only played 1 game, and that's when this came to the surface that he had used up his eligibility by playing in 2019 at Alabama State. But his big year was in 2023 when he was at New Mexico, 1,100 yards, 17 touchdowns. And he did have 106 games in their opening win against his old team, New Mexico, and then declared ineligible. So one way to look at this is he's had a year where he's been able to mostly rest his body. That may help him. And it's a 7th-round pick. If it works, it works. One other thing, I forgot to play this. This is Trey Amos, for whatever this is worth. This is about a guy who Adam Peters says was a first-round grade, had a first-round grade, goes in the second round, and probably was a little bit disappointed that he slipped to the second. But coming to Washington, he seems pretty pleased about it. And asked if he was surprised, said,
I was surprised, but you just never know with the draft. Anything could hit you. Just gotta stay positive throughout the storm, and and once your numbers get called, it's go time regardless.
Hey Trey, what do you want your new teammates to know most about you as you come to the Commanders?
Just a person that's ready to work. Pretty straightforward. Just ready to get to know everyone, make everybody better, and just go out there and compete and get straight to business.
Trey, how would you describe your game, and how do you fit in Washington?
I feel like fitting in the Commanders' defensive game. I feel like just being aggressive. I feel like the whole defense is played on being aggressive, and I could bring more to that table and bring in my talents and just overall just being more productive, as a whole.
Hey, Trey, did you play against Jaden when you were at Alabama? And if so, what do you remember about that, Jaden Daniels?
Man, playing against playing against him at Bama, great game. Can't wait to talk to him, conversate. But Jaden is a real great player, great quarterback, and I'm looking forward to more events and get to know him.
That's Trey Amos, one of the 5 players picked in the last few days by the Commanders. Another interesting little aspect out of the draft is that Sean Taylor's brother is going to be brought in as an undrafted free agent to get a look. He played, I think, at a couple of schools and wound up finishing his career at Rice. Be a magical story if he were to make the team. I don't know how realistic it is. It's certainly good PR. It's something that'll be a feel good, and I'm sure he'll get a lot of attention when he's in their camp. I think it's another smart move on the part of an organization that has done seemingly everything right in the last 24 months, where you get a real general manager who knows what the hell he's doing, a good coach who did change the culture, unlike what Ron Rivera gave himself credit for. You've made the stadium inhabitable. You won 11 games for the first time since 1991. You made it to the NFC Championship game for the first time since that 1991 season. And now you've got a deal to build a stadium. I'm just looking through social media on what's going to be what at this news conference at 11 o'clock. And Mark Maskey tweeted out a picture of the stage at the National Press Club, and there's a big sign in burgundy and gold behind a table which has 3 microphones in front of it. Muriel Bowser, Josh Harris, I'm wondering who the third person will be, that they are going to be announcing this with this big burgundy welcome home sign behind it. And Muriel Bowser, who has talked for years about bringing the team back to the District of Columbia, gets a lot of credit for this, as does Josh Harris. And it's no small thing that the team is going to pay this kind of money to build the stadium there. They're in the business of making money, and they will make money on this down the road. But this is a big outlay. It wouldn't have cost nearly $2.5 billion to build on the site where they have the land out on the Fed or the Northwest Stadium site in Landover. But this is what they wanted to do when they took over the team. These are 3 guys who have history here. I think that's very important. Josh Harris grew up in Chevy Chase, didn't have season tickets in his family, but went to games. Mitch Rales, same thing. And Mark Ein, who put the 2 of them together, his family did have season tickets. And there's great feel for what this team has been and could be again, playing at the site of their greatest glory, especially the years of the 1980s back in Washington, D.C. And so that'll come up at 11 o'clock today from the National Press Club. What happens with this draft? We'll have to see. Commanders did not reach big. They did not trade up. They stayed where they were staying and picked where they were supposed to pick, and we'll see how the 5 draft picks work out. All right, that's a wrap for me. Bram will have some follow-up on the draft, and I think we will have coverage of this news conference coming up at 11 o'clock, and I will have React on that tomorrow as well. Have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.